Hey girlfriends, settle in, grab your florals because today we're talking about It Ends in Court. Sorry, it ends with us. So I had been putting off watching this movie with all the drama that surrounded it. It didn't make me want to watch the movie. It made me sort of stay clear of it. But I did watch it and I have some thoughts. So first of all, I did read the book. I read the book 3 years ago. I read the book in 2022. And when I read the book, it was when the general consensus seemed to be that everyone loved Colleen Hoover. And despite her writing lots of books, I'd never really heard of her until she started blowing up on like Book Talk for It Ends With Us. And I read the blurb of this book and I was like, that sounds pretty good and everyone's hyping it up. So I bought it and I read it. Now I think you'd struggle to read It Ends With Us without actually knowing what the story's about because it's so talked about. But the blurb of this book just makes it sound like it's a love triangle, and it's not. Like, the blurb of this book really just makes it sound like it's a love triangle about a girl who moves, she falls in love with someone new, and then, like, her former flame, first love, the one that got away, comes back, and then they just make it sound like the whole story is a love triangle between the three of them. Sort of like, I guess, the Materialists movie. That's what I thought this book would be. Luckily, I did not grow up with any form of abuse. I come from a very, very safe, very loving household. I've only ever dated lovely, safe, kind men. So no trigger warning was needed for me in this book. But had I been a victim of domestic abuse and I read this book thinking I was reading a sweet love triangle rom-com, yeah. This book is probably one of the most confusing books I've ever read because I hated it, but like I was riveted and I couldn't put it down. I read it in 2 days whilst like working days when I was busy and because I just couldn't put it down, I had to finish it. I remember literally reading the book and like saying out loud, I hate this, but I just couldn't put it down. It was a really fascinating read because I think it's the first time in my life I've ever experienced that relationship with a book. And then cut to the following year when there's an announcement that the book is being made into a movie. And then we got the cast announcements. I was very much like in the majority of people that was just like, Blake Lively, she's way too old. I still feel like that. I'll get onto that more when we talk about the movie. I think everything that happened with this movie and everything that went wrong comes back to that. This movie was miscast. And then the movie was in production and we obviously got all the sort of leaked photos from the set where we had like the double trouser situation, crazy outfits. And that made me worried about the movie because, again, I was in the general consensus that it should have been someone younger and her outfits should have been more sort of like boho as opposed to just like whatever they were. And then we got to the movie promo and we all know what happened there. We had, I can't even remember what the source was at the beginning, but it was like the wrong marketing, I guess, is what started it all. Everyone was sort of like, why are they marketing this movie like it's a rom-com to wear florals when it's about domestic abuse? And then we had Blake Lively come back saying that it would all been a smear campaign by Justin, then Justin fired back, and it's just been ongoing ever since. In regards to all that, like, that's not what I'm gonna talk about today. And I have my personal, I think, assumptions and opinions of what I think probably happened, but I'm very much aware of how the media controls narratives and how influenced people are by media propaganda. And so I purposely try not to have a strong opinion because I don't know what happened. All the information being fed to me is through an intentional narrative. And, you know, there's two sides to every story, innocent until proven guilty. I think people can have their opinions and their suspicions, but I feel like people forget that a lot, that they're humans, you don't know what happened. So all of that really just put me off engaging in the movie. And actually, what made me watch this movie sooner than I thought I ever would, I saw its Rotten Tomatoes score, and the audience score was 88%, which really caught my eye because I assumed it would have been like a flop, like 40% at maximum. So the fact it was 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, I was really like, that's super interesting. I'm going to have to watch it. So the first thing that really struck me as soon as I started this movie, Blake Lively came on my screen. She was driving in a car and immediately I just thought, she's too old. Blake Lively is a mother of 3 in her late 30s and she looks it. And no shade to Blake Lively, she's obviously gorgeous. When I'm in my late 30s, if I have 3 kids, which I won't, but if I did, God, I'd pray to God that I looked as amazing as she does. She's obviously gorgeous. She's Blake Lively. But she looks like a mum of 3 in her late 30s. And that was really jarring and took me out because I know that the book is based on a 24-year-old girl. Obviously, they've aged up the characters in this book. And I'm in two minds about this. At first, when Blake Lively came on my screen, and I was like, she's too old. And when they initially announced the cast, I was like, they're too old. Having watched the movie and having had a night to dwell on it, my thoughts are, I actually think it was probably the correct decision to age up the characters. And I think in the book, the problem was that they were too young. Because Ryle is a neurosurgeon. I checked in the book. In the book, he's apparently 30 and she's 24. So they have like a 6-year age gap. But a 30-year-old neurosurgeon, I am not a doctor. I've never gone to medical school or trained to be a doctor. But I'm fairly confident neurosurgeons are not 30 years old. I can't comprehend how you'd be a neurosurgeon at 30. And maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, I don't know. But in my head, I feel like you'd have to be at least 35 before you can confidently say, like, I am a neurosurgeon. It also made sense that Lily is aged up because she's starting her business and she opens a flower shop. For anyone who doesn't know, in order to open that type of business that's like on site with stock, the amount of capital you have to input to start a business like that is ridiculous. So it made sense to me that she was older. It implied she's probably been saving up for years, had a lot of like financial credit to go to the bank with to get a business loan. So a lot of it did make sense to me that they were aged up. I also felt like it made more sense that like the Atlas and Lily thing, because in the book, they separate 17, 18 and they're 24. So it's not been that long. Whereas when they're aged up an extra 10 years, it feels more like this lost love you fell out of contact with. However, what they didn't do in the movie is they aged up the characters, but they didn't fill in this age difference. So specifically with Lily, in the book, she leaves home at 18. She goes to university or college, and then she moves to Boston to open a flower shop. In the movie, like she's clearly had her entire 20s somewhere else, living in a different city, working different jobs. Like, has she been in any other serious relationships? Does she not have any other friends? That part of her backstory wasn't filled in, and it didn't need to be super filled in. All it needed to be was just sort of like a bit of context in a conversation with Jenny Slate's character or with Ryle. That would have done it, but I did feel like her life was very empty because they'd aged her up and not filled in the gaps. I don't know, so I am in two minds of where like it makes more sense to the characters and the plot for them to be aged up, but they might have been aged up too much. Like instead of being 24, maybe she was like 28. And they never actually tell you the ages of the characters in the movie. So I'm obviously assuming that the age up was to Blake Lively's actual age. She's 37 now. This film was, don't know, when did they film maybe 2 years ago, so she would have been 35. Obviously, she wasn't necessarily playing a 35-year-old, but it's safe to say they're in their early 30s at least. The actress that they had playing the teenage version of Lily was such good casting. I thought they looked really similar. She did a really, really good job impersonating Blake Lively's voice as well. However, the girl who played teenage Lily didn't look like a teenager. She herself looked like she was in her 20s. So all that made me think when I was watching that was kind of like, why didn't they just use this actress to play Lily the entire time? All you had to do was dress her more maturely and do her hair maybe a bit differently to make her look older. And then for the flashbacks, put her in, pigtails and like younger outfits and no makeup and stuff. I don't think they needed to cast two people. The fact that they did need to cast two people because they couldn't make Blake Lively look like a teenager kind of says it all. So yeah, I'm really in two minds about the age up. I'm pro, but at the same time kind of con. I will say as well, I thought the cinematography was really nice in this movie. You can tell it was a high budget movie. It was very crisp. I thought the colour was really nice and the shots were really nice. The soundtrack was obviously very high budget. They clearly spent a lot of money on getting the rights to songs for this movie. The fact it opened with Ethel Cain just made me levitate off the sofa, and I was like, oh my God. Because I'm a huge Ethel Cain fan, and they opened with an Ethel Cain song which is about a girl who gets murdered and cannibalised by her boyfriend, and I was kind of like, that's sort of a genius metaphor for domestic abuse, if that was their intention, which you'd have to assume it was. So I do think the soundtrack was really good. I'm a Taylor Swift fan, so I'm pro the big Taylor Swift song used, but in general, cinematography for this movie, even the directing of this movie was good. It was a really well-made movie, which kind of makes the whole drama surrounding it even more sad, because I do think Justin Baldoni did a good job directing. There was sort of this thing, wasn't there, where there was two cuts of the movie and one was Blake's and one was Justin's. And I don't know which one we ended up getting at the end. Did we get Blake's at the end or did we get Justin's? You'd like to assume we got Justin's, seeing as he's the director. But if these two different cuts exist, I would absolutely love to see the two different versions and see what is different about them. And I went into this movie thinking that it would be really, really sort of uncomfortable to watch Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni scenes of them being intimate and in love. And I thought it would be really cringy. And I don't know, the knowledge that they hate each other, I was like, how is this going to come across on screen? And how's it going to make me feel? I think that was a big part of why I didn't want to watch the movie, because I was a bit like, I just think it'll be weird to watch these two people on screen together. But I will say this, if I didn't suspect that their drama was based on the fact that one or both of them caught feelings after watching this movie, I absolutely, definitely think that now. The on-screen chemistry was crazy. I was expecting them to sort of give off that they didn't want to be acting with each other because they hated each other. It was crazy. It was really, really good on-screen chemistry. And I am aware that on-screen chemistry doesn't always mean that they have chemistry off-screen. I've listened to plenty of actors in interviews talk about it is the acting, and it's a combination of lots of different factors that dictate whether it's going to come across well on screen. And I've seen people who are married in real life on screen together have no chemistry. So I am aware that chemistry in real life does not equal chemistry on screen, but their on-screen chemistry was incredible. And their first on-screen kiss, specifically, I was just like, oh shit, yes, they definitely caught feelings. At least one of them did. And I think I know which one. And in the book, there's a lot of sex, and I didn't know if there would be a lot of sex in the movie. When I watched the movie, I hadn't really thought about it, but I didn't expect there to be a lot of sex in the movie. And there's not really, there's no they're clearly naked with modesty patches on, humping under a blanket. But there is a lot of like touching in this movie, and then sort of like fade to black. And there's a lot of like montage content. So Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni must have filmed a lot of scenes kissing, touching each other, being half clothed, etc., which is really crazy after everything that's gone on. And it was very much all I could think about whilst I was watching the movie. And it really had me glued to the screen when I was watching the movie, because I was just thinking, these people are literally trying to sue each other. But would you look at this? That was the wildest part of watching this entire movie for me, was just seeing how much chemistry they had on screen together and being like, oh, shit. We have Atlas as well. I don't even know the name of the actor. Brandon, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, played Atlas. Where the young Lily casting was like spot on, literally looked exactly like her. The young casting of Atlas, absolutely terrible, looked nothing alike. I don't know how they could absolutely perfect one and then get the other one completely wrong, but they did. The problem with Atlas, like Atlas and Lily in the movie were fine. They didn't not have chemistry. I think they probably had good chemistry, but you couldn't really tell because it was so overshadowed by Blake and Justin's insane chemistry. I also found that when I read the book, very much all the way through, I hated Ryle and was very team Atlas. Whereas when I watched the movie, I think it was just because Blake and Justin had such good on-screen chemistry that I was just kind of like, Atlas is there. I think they needed to balance it out more in the movie, because really Atlas is the main love interest. So the scenes with him should have been so much more like yearning, and they were done well, but to like offset the Blake Justin chemistry, they always had to give me more, because it was an example of a love triangle where I should be like really like, oh my god, no, she needs to be with him. Ugh. But like watching it, I was just kind of like, yes, give us nothing. But the book felt much more set up intentionally for her to end up with Atlas. Whereas in the movie, I don't think you really understood that until maybe like 3/4 of the way through, which leads me into kind of like the biggest takeaway I had from the movie versus the book, really, which was their decision to sort of downplay the abuse. And the thing is, I understand why they did it in the movie. So in the movie and in the book, there are 3 main scenarios where the abuse happens. It's when they're cooking, he smacks her in the face because he burns his hand. Then he pushes her down some stairs, and then he gets angry and like tries to rape her. Am I allowed to say rape on YouTube? I think so. Grape. Should I say grape instead? He tries to grape her. All 3 of those scenes are in the movie, and they're pretty well done, I would say. I think they're well shot, the acting's good, etc. But in the book, it's really, really clear that it's Ryle doing it intentionally from the start. So in the movie, besides the final grape attempt, I should really say, in the scene where she is with him in the kitchen, and then in the scene where she gets pushed down the stairs, both are filmed twice. So the first time they happen, it's filmed to show it's a genuine accident. Like, they show Justin burning his hand, pulling the thing out the oven, and his reflexes is he goes back and drops the hot plate, and in doing so he hits her, and it's a complete accident, and they film it that way. And again, when they film her falling down the stairs, the first time you see it in the film, it is filmed like she runs in front of him when he's about to walk down the next flight of stairs, and she just trips and falls. Like, he doesn't touch her. And then later in the movie, when she thinks back on those moments, they show it filmed differently. They show it filmed how it is described in the book, where he purposely is like, ugh, and he purposely pushes her. I kind of get why they did it. I think they did it so that it would feel a bit more like a twist at the end of the movie. But I don't think they should have changed that. Again, I understand why they did, but it made you like feel bad for Ryle, because had I not read the book and I just watched the movie, until the end, I would be like, so what actually happened? Which version of it was real? Is Lily an unreliable narrator?
How far would you go?
I'm not sure. I'm an unreliable narrator.
Like I say, in the movie, the first time you see the scene in the kitchen, like they show you it on camera what happens and it's an accident. But in the book, as soon as it's happened, this is a quote from the book. I secure the bandage around his hand, then look him in the eye. Ryle, if anything like that ever happens again, I know that this time it wasn't just an accident, and I'll leave you without a second thought. So like from the start, you know that Lily knows he pushed her and it was intentional. The point is he's just like, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. It was an accident. I'm sorry. Whereas in the movie, it's portrayed as a genuine accident. And then similarly, on the stairwell, in the book, when they're describing what happens, like, well, it's actually, this is her after she wakes up after being unconscious, but she immediately knows what happens. I grabbed his shirt, he pushed me away. He told me I fell down the stairs, but I didn't fall. He pushed me again. That's twice. You pushed me, Ryle. Another thing that they miss out of the book, out of the film that was in the book, that I think they should have kept, like, maybe it was timing, but I think they could have cut down the first half of them just falling in love to better show the domestic stuff, is in the book, after she falls down the stairs, she leaves him. She breaks up with him. She's like, I'm not being with you. You've pushed me twice. You've hurt me twice. I'm not staying with you. And she leaves him. And then he comes back grovelling, explains that he is the one that killed his brother accidentally as a child. In the movie, she finds it out from his sister. In the book, he tells her, and he tells her, I have issues with my rage. I really don't want to hurt you. I'm trying to work it out. You have to help me. You're the only one who can help me be better. And she takes him back. And they don't put that in the movie. And I think that's such an important part of the story in the book. Because the whole point of the book is trying to show why you could be in an abusive situation like that and stay with them and believe them when they say they're going to change. But in the movie, until the grape scene, basically, that's the first time where you see that what he's been doing is intentionally vicious and abusive. And I think that was a massive mistake, because that would have actually solved a big problem of making you root for Atlas more in the film. Because in the book, you obviously root for Atlas all the time, because Ryle is a walking red flag the entire time. Like, I do think the movie should have had more foreshadowing of Ryle being really angry and aggressive. In the movie, the only thing they really show is when they first meet and he walks onto the roof, he like really angrily kicks a chair. In the book, he's a walking red flag from the start. There's a scene in the book where they've met one time on the roof and he takes a picture of her on the roof, and then when she goes round to his house for the party, they cut it from the movie. But in the book, she goes round and on his wall, he's had this photo of her blown up massive on the wall, and they met once and he doesn't know her. I just think they should have done more foreshadowing, and I don't think they should have made it seem like what happened was accidents. To an extent, I understand why they were. I think it's kind of cool to film them twice and show that like you remember things differently and make excuses for people. But it didn't, like, it just left me actually feeling kind of bad for Ryle in the movie, which is something I did not remotely feel while reading the book. In the book, he was very much just like a walking red flag, a villain. Like, I was reading it like, oh my God, get away from this man. Whereas in the movie, it felt like two accidents and then aggressiveness. And this is kind of where I wonder if the two different version cuts of the movie show that differently. And to be honest, maybe those changes came from the fact that they wanted to market it more as like this empowering women's movie or like market it more as a romance. Because what the movie needed to be, what the book really is, to be fair, we go on about how the movie was marketed wrong. The book is marketed wrong. It's pink. It's like I said, the blurb makes it sound like it's a love triangle. It's a serious story about domestic abuse and ending generational trauma cycles. And the book, but especially the movie, should have lent into that more. Like, it shouldn't have been marketed as this girly movie. It's a drama. And I think they should have made the movie darker. And like I say, I don't think they should have just made the abuse look as accidental. Like, it's kind of cool that they filmed it twice, but I don't think they should have. I think they should have showed him pushing her and showed him like, please, no, I didn't mean it. I promise I won't do it again. I promise I won't do it again. I promise I won't do it again. Because that is what happens in domestic abuse relationships. Those women know what's happened, but they're in love. The whole point of the book is to show how hard it is for women to leave when they're in these type of relationships. And where they showed that in the book, they diluted it in the movie, and I do not think that was the right decision. Because It Ends With Us is used a lot in this argument against romance, like in how romance romanticizes toxicity and abuse. It Ends With Us is always used as an example for that. I would argue that this book is not a romance. It has romantic elements, but really it's drama, or it's women's fiction or literary fiction, maybe. I don't know if you could class Colleen Hoover as literary. But I am going to be devil's advocate here, because I don't think this book romanticizes domestic abuse at all. I think people who haven't read this book look at the pink cover, know it's about domestic abuse, and assume it therefore must romanticize it. The whole point of this book, like I say, is ending generational cycles of domestic abuse. The main character knows what's happening. She witnessed it happen with her mum. She resents her mum and she hates her dad. But in the book, like I say, she leaves him. She leaves him twice. And when she has his child, the whole point, that the title of the book is, when she has a daughter, she's like, that, no, I'm not letting my daughter grow up in a household where she witnesses her mum get hit and raped. Like, it ends with us. It ends with me and my daughter. It ends with us.
It ends with us.
I don't know. Yeah, again, I'm not a survivor of domestic abuse, so I can't speak to the accuracy of what it is like to be in that type of relationship. But as someone who doesn't know it, reading this book really gave me an insight into understanding why it could be difficult for someone to leave and break out of the cycle. So I do think that people like to blame this book a lot for romanticising abuse. But I think if you actually read and understand the book, it's absolutely not romanticising the abuse. I think the whole issue with the book and the movie is the fact they try to lean on the romance of it. And yeah, is romance in it, but really it's a drama that's quite dark about domestic abuse, which is why I think rightly, when the movie was being promoted, the criticism it got for wear your florals and bring your girlfriends. What are we doing here? There was nothing wrong with the movie had it just been marketed as a drama. Had it not been pink flowers. I think fix that, you've fixed a lot of the issues. But overall, it was a pretty good movie. I obviously had sort of my annoyances that I wish they didn't dilute the abuse as much. I wish they made me hate Ryle more, because I hated him in the book from the first page he shows up. But in the movie, you kind of root for him and like him, which I guess is kind of the point. Like, if you were in a relationship with someone, you would be in love with them and think they were a good person in order to stay with them. So again, the changes they made, I understand why they made them, but I think they would have been more effective if they hadn't made the changes. But surprisingly, I didn't hate this movie. The first half in particular, I thought was really good and really well built. The second half, I guess, from the point the abuse starts, that's when it wasn't as good, but it was still a good movie. And I think it's actually quite a shame that all of the crap happened with the promotion and with the legal battles and smear campaigns, because the movie probably would have done very well. Maybe it still did do well because people wanted to watch because of all the drama. But I do think it is a shame for the movie and the work that they did put in, because it was actually all right. I didn't hate it. I would watch it again. I'm quite excited to edit this video to be able to watch the clips of the movie again, specifically like Blake and Justin on screen together. I'm really looking forward just to editing this video to see those clips again. But yeah, that's what I have to say on It Ends With Us. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought. Yeah, that's it for today. Florals off.